The dust kicked up in clouds so thick that Francesca Vaughn could taste it between her teeth as she galloped past the finish line. Her chestnut mares, hooves thundering against the packed earth, while the crowd erupted in disbelief. She had just beaten Yates Norton, the fastest cowboy in Chaffee County, and judging by the stunned silence that followed the cheering, nobody had expected it. Not the ranchers who had gathered outside the general store in Salida, Colorado on this sweltering August afternoon in 1882. Not the shopkeepers who had abandoned their posts to watch, and certainly not Yates himself, who sat astride his black stallion looking like he had just swallowed a mouthful of bitter coffee. Francesca brought her mare to a gentle trot, circling back toward the starting point where the unofficial finish line had been marked with 2 barrels. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and she could feel the adrenaline singing through her veins like electricity through telegraph wires. She had done it. She had actually done it. For weeks, she had listened to the men in town go on and on about Yates Norton's unbeatable record, about how no horse in the county could match his stallion's speed, about how he had never lost a race in the 3 years since he had moved to Salida from Texas. The boasting had grated on her nerves until finally, yesterday at the Mercantile, she had heard him accept yet another challenge from a cocky young ranch hand, and she had stepped forward with her own proposition. The memory of the laughter that had followed still stung. Men did not take kindly to being challenged by women, especially not in matters of horsemanship. But Francesca had stood her ground, arms crossed over her riding vest, chin lifted in defiance. She had been riding since before she could walk, raised on her father's ranch just outside of town, and she knew horses better than most men knew their own wives. When Yates had finally stopped chuckling and agreed, probably thinking it would be an easy win and good entertainment, she had shaken his hand with a grip firm enough to surprise him. Now, as she approached the crowd, she could see him dismounting, his tall frame unfolding from the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. He was somewhere in his mid-20s, she guessed, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends where it brushed his collar. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, like sage in the early morning light, and they were fixed on her with an expression she could not quite read. "Well, I will be," one of the older ranchers said, slapping his knee. "She actually beat you, Norton. Never thought I would see the day." Yates removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, and Francesca noticed that his jaw was tight, though whether from embarrassment or anger, she could not tell. She slid down from her mare's back, giving the animal an affectionate pat on the neck. The horse's coat was slick with sweat, her sides heaving, but her eyes were bright and alert. They had trained for this, practiced the route along the creek bed and back through the cottonwoods, timing themselves until Francesca knew exactly when to give the mare her head and when to hold back. "Fair and square," Francesca said, meeting Yates's gaze. She tried to keep the triumph out of her voice, but it was difficult. "Though I have to say, your stallion is as fast as everyone claims. Close race." It had been close, too close. For most of the route, they had been neck and neck, the horses' hooves pounding in rhythm, dust billowing behind them like smoke from a prairie fire. It was only in the final stretch, when Francesca had leaned low over her mare's neck and whispered encouragement, that they had pulled ahead by half a length. Yates studied her for a long moment, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Finally, he put his hat back on and extended his hand. "Fair and square," he agreed, and when she shook it, his grip was strong and warm, his palm calloused from years of ranch work. "You are one hell of a rider, Miss Vaughn." The crowd began to disperse, some of the men grumbling about lost bets, others laughing and rehashing the highlights of the race. Francesca was about to lead her mare to the water trough when Yates cleared his throat. "I want a rematch," he said. She turned back to him, eyebrows raised. "Sore loser." "Not at all," he said, and there was something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "But I believe in learning from my mistakes, and I made plenty today. How about we discuss terms over dinner? Say, tomorrow evening at the Grand Hotel." Francesca felt her mouth fall open slightly. Of all the things she had expected him to say, an invitation to dinner had not been among them. The Grand Hotel was the finest establishment in Salida, a place where cattle barons entertained business associates and where traveling dignitaries stayed when they passed through town. It was not the sort of place a ranch girl from the outskirts usually found herself. "Are you asking me to dinner so you can try to figure out how I beat you?" she asked, suspicious. "I am asking you to dinner because I would like to know you better," Yates said simply. "The rematch is just an excuse, though I will admit I am curious about your training methods." She should have said no. Her father would have a fit if he knew she was dining alone with a man she barely knew, even if it was in a public restaurant. But there was something about the way Yates was looking at her, with genuine interest rather than the condescension she usually encountered from men, that made her want to accept. "6 o'clock," she said finally, "and I expect you to be a gentleman." "Would not dream of being anything else," he replied, and the smile that crossed his face transformed his features from handsome to something altogether more dangerous. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation and second-guessing. Francesca helped her father with the morning chores, mucking out stalls and repairing a section of fence that had been damaged during a recent storm, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying the conversation with Yates, analyzing every word, every gesture. What did he really want? Was this truly about getting to know her? Or was it some elaborate scheme to salvage his bruised pride? Her father, Robert Vaughn, noticed her distraction around midday. He was a weathered man in his early 50s, his face deeply lined from years of squinting into the sun, his hands gnarled from hard work. He had raised Francesca alone after her mother died of fever when Francesca was just 8 years old, and he had done his best to be both parent and teacher. "You have been jumpy as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs," he observed as they sat down to a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and cold beef. "Something on your mind?" Francesca debated whether to tell him about the dinner, then decided honesty was the best approach. "I am having dinner with Yates Norton tonight at the Grand Hotel." Her father set down his cup of water with a thud. "The cowboy you raced yesterday, the same. And he asked you to dinner after you beat him. He wants a rematch. We are going to discuss terms." Robert studied his daughter's face, and she could see the concern in his eyes. "Francesca, you are 22 years old, and I trust your judgment, but Norton is new to these parts. We do not know much about him beyond his reputation with horses. Which is why I am having dinner with him in a public place," Francesca pointed out. "To learn more," her father sighed. "Just be careful and be back before dark." She agreed, though she suspected that 6 o'clock dinner at the Grand Hotel would likely extend past sunset. As soon as the lunch dishes were cleaned, she retreated to her small bedroom to agonize over what to wear. Her wardrobe was practical rather than fashionable, consisting mostly of riding skirts, simple blouses, and sturdy boots. She did have one good dress, a deep blue cotton with mother-of-pearl buttons that she had worn to church services and the occasional town social, and she pulled it from the trunk at the foot of her bed now, shaking out the wrinkles. By the time she had bathed, dressed, and arranged her long auburn hair into something resembling a respectable style, It was nearly 5:30. Her father had already hitched the wagon, insisting on driving her into town despite her protests that she could ride her mare. They made the journey in companionable silence, the mountains rising majestically to the west, their peaks still capped with snow even in August. Salida itself was a growing town, its fortunes tied to the arrival of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad 3 years earlier. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with businesses that served both the local ranching community and the travelers who passed through on their way to mining camps in the high country. The Grand Hotel stood at the corner of First Street and F Street, a 2-story brick building with a covered porch and glass windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Yates was waiting on the porch, and Francesca felt her breath catch when she saw him. He had cleaned up considerably since yesterday, trading his dusty work clothes for pressed trousers, a white shirt, and a dark vest. His boots were polished, his hair was combed, and he had shaved, revealing a strong jawline with a slight cleft in the chin. When he saw her climbing down from the wagon, he descended the steps quickly to offer his hand. "Miss Vaughn," he said, his voice warm. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she managed, acutely aware of her father watching from the wagon seat. "You clean up well yourself." Yates acknowledged Robert with a polite nod. "Mr. Vaughn, I will make sure your daughter gets home safely." "See that you do," Robert said gruffly, then clicked his tongue at the horses and drove away, leaving Francesca alone with Yates. The restaurant inside the Grand Hotel was more elegant than Francesca had anticipated, with tables covered in white cloths and actual napkins folded into neat triangles. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, its oil lamps casting a warm glow over the room. Most of the tables were occupied by well-dressed diners, their conversations creating a pleasant hum of background noise. Yates had reserved a table by the window, which offered a view of the street and the mountains beyond. He held out her chair for her, and she sat, feeling suddenly nervous. This was not her usual environment. She was far more comfortable in a saddle than in a fancy restaurant. "Relax," Yates said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "I am just as out of place here as you are. Back in Texas, my family ate at a table we built ourselves, and the fanciest dish was whatever my mother could make with beans and salt pork." That made her smile. "So why choose this place?" "Because you deserve it," he said simply. "You won fair and square, and I wanted to celebrate that, even if it was at my expense." A waiter appeared to take their order, and Yates deferred to Francesca, who selected the roasted chicken with potatoes and green beans. Yates ordered the same, along with a bottle of wine that the waiter assured them was quite good, though he admitted it had come all the way from California. As they waited for their food, Francesca found herself relaxing despite her initial discomfort. Yates had a way of putting her at ease, asking questions about her life on the ranch, her experiences with horses, her thoughts on Salida and its future. He listened intently when she spoke, his eyes never leaving her face, and he did not interrupt or dismiss her opinions the way so many men did. "Your turn," she said finally, after she had told him about growing up on the ranch and learning to ride from her father. "What brought you to Colorado from Texas?" Yates leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. "My family has a ranch outside of San Antonio. Good land, good cattle. But I have 3 older brothers, and there was not room for all of us. The ranch would go to the eldest, as is tradition, and the second and third sons were already established with their own spreads nearby. I was the one left out, so I decided to head north and see what opportunities I could find." "And you found Salida?" "I found work on the Thompson Ranch, about 10 miles south of town," he said. "Been there 2 years now." Mr. Thompson is getting on in years and he has been talking about selling. I have been saving every penny, hoping to buy him out when the time comes. That is quite an ambition. It is the only one worth having, Yates said. A man needs land of his own, a place to put down roots. I am tired of drifting. The food arrived, and it was better than anything Francesca usually ate. The chicken was tender and perfectly seasoned, the potatoes were fluffy with butter, and the green beans had been cooked with bits of bacon that added a smoky flavor. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Francesca realized she was enjoying herself more than she had expected. About that rematch, Yates said eventually, setting down his fork. I was thinking we could make it more interesting. How so? A longer course. Not just the creek route, but out past the Thompson ranch and back. Maybe 20 miles instead of 5. Give the horses a real challenge. Francesca considered this. Her mare was fast in short bursts, but she had never tested the animal's endurance over such a distance. Still, the challenge intrigued her. And if I win again, then I will concede that you are the finest rider in Chaffee County and stop boring everyone with my undefeated record. And if you win, Yates met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made her heart skip. Then you agree to have dinner with me again, and maybe a ride sometime, just for pleasure rather than competition. She should have been offended by his presumption, but instead she found herself smiling. You are confident, Mr. Norton. Call me Yates. And yes, I am confident. But I also know when I have met my match. They talked long into the evening, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. Francesca learned that Yates loved to read, particularly books about history and exploration, and that he had a younger sister back in Texas who wrote him letters filled with gossip about their hometown. Yates learned that Francesca had dreams of expanding her father's ranch, of breeding horses that would be known throughout Colorado for their speed and temperament, and that she sometimes felt trapped by the expectations placed on women in their society. I want more than just marriage and children, she admitted, then immediately worried she had said too much. Not that there is anything wrong with that, but I want to build something to leave a mark on the world. I understand that completely, Yates said. And I do not see why you cannot have both if you find the right partner, someone who supports your ambitions rather than trying to stifle them. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Francesca felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she reached for her wine glass to give herself something to do with her hands. By the time Yates escorted her outside, it was fully dark, the street lit by lamps that cast pools of golden light onto the dusty ground. True to his word, he had arranged for a buggy to take her home, not wanting her to make the journey alone. He helped her up onto the seat, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for tonight, he said. I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself this much. Neither can I, Francesca admitted. And yes to the rematch. 20 miles out past the Thompson ranch and back. When do you want to do it? Yates grinned, that same smile that transformed his entire face. How about Sunday? Gives us both a few days to prepare. Sunday it is. He stepped back as the driver clicked to the horses, and Francesca watched him until the buggy turned the corner and he disappeared from view. Her mind was racing, thoughts tumbling over one another like stones in a stream. What was happening to her? She had known Yates Norton for less than 2 days, and yet she could not stop thinking about him, about the way he looked at her, about the warmth in his voice when he spoke. Her father was waiting up when she arrived home, sitting on the porch with his pipe. "Have a good evening," he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "I did," Francesca said, sitting down beside him. "He is a good man, Papa, respectful and kind, and we are going to race again on Sunday. Robert puffed on his pipe, the smoke curling up into the night air. "Be careful, Frankie," he said, using the nickname he had given her as a child. "Not just with the race, but with your heart. I can see it in your eyes. You are already falling for him." She wanted to deny it, but she could not lie to her father. "Maybe I am," she said quietly. "Is that so terrible?" "Not terrible, just scary. For both of us." They sat together in silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Colorado sky, and Francesca wondered what Sunday would bring. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. Francesca spent every spare moment with her mare, conditioning the animal for the longer race. She mapped out the route in her mind, visualizing every hill and turn, every place where she might gain an advantage or need to conserve energy. She adjusted her mare's diet, adding extra oats to build strength, and she checked and rechecked her tack to ensure everything was in perfect order. She also thought about Yates far more than she should have. She caught herself daydreaming while working, her mind wandering to the way he had looked at her across the dinner table, the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand when he had helped her into the buggy. It was maddening and wonderful all at once. On Saturday, the day before the race, she rode into town for supplies and ran into Yates outside the mercantile. He was loading feed bags onto a wagon, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and he broke into a smile when he saw her. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Should I be? Probably not. I have a feeling you are going to give me a run for my money again." They talked for a few minutes, discussing the route and the rules, and then Yates grew more serious. "Francesca, regardless of who wins tomorrow, I want you to know that I meant what I said at dinner. I would like to keep seeing you if you are amenable to that." Her heart fluttered. "I am amenable," she said softly. "Very amenable." "Good," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "Then let us have ourselves a race, and afterward we can talk about the future." Sunday dawned clear and warm, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Francesca was up before sunrise, feeding and grooming her mare, going over every detail one last time. Her father helped her prepare, offering quiet encouragement and advice, and by the time they loaded the horse into the trailer and headed into town, she felt as ready as she would ever be. A crowd had gathered at the starting point, news of the rematch having spread through the community like wildfire. There were easily twice as many spectators as there had been for the first race, ranchers and townspeople alike eager to see if Francesca could repeat her victory, or if Yates would reclaim his title. Yates was already there when she arrived, his black stallion saddled and ready. He looked focused but calm, and when he saw her, he rode over, leaning down from the saddle to speak quietly so only she could hear. "Good luck," he said, "and may the best rider win." "Good luck to you too," she replied, meaning it. They lined up at the starting point, and one of the town elders, a grizzled former cavalry officer named Coleman, raised his pistol in the air. "Same rules as before," he called out. "First one back to this spot wins. Anyone caught cheating or interfering with the other rider is disqualified." "Understood." Both Francesca and Yates nodded. "On my count then. 3, 2, 1. The pistol cracked and they were off. The first mile was a blur of speed and adrenaline, both horses stretching out into a full gallop as they left the town behind. Francesca leaned low over her mare's neck, feeling the powerful muscles bunching and releasing beneath her, the wind whipping her hair back from her face. Beside her, Yates and his stallion kept pace, the two animals running almost in sync. They followed the creek for the first few miles, the water glittering in the morning sun, cottonwood trees providing occasional shade. The course then turned south, away from the creek and into open rangeland, the grass brown and dry from the summer heat. This was where the race would truly be won or lost, Francesca knew. The terrain was rougher here, with hidden gullies and patches of loose rock that could trip up an unwary horse. She let Yates pull slightly ahead, conserving her mare's energy for the long haul. 20 miles was a different beast than 5, and she could not afford to burn out too early. Yates seemed to realize this as well, because after a few minutes, he eased his stallion back to a more sustainable pace, matching her stride for stride. They rode in silence, the only sounds the thunder of hooves, the creak of leather, and the ragged breathing of the horses. The Thompson Ranch came into view around the 8-mile mark, its buildings small in the distance, and Francesca knew they were approaching the halfway point. The course called for them to circle around a massive oak tree that stood alone in a field about a mile past the ranch, then head back the way they had come. As they neared the oak, Yates suddenly spurred his stallion forward, pulling ahead by several lengths. Francesca felt a surge of competitive fire and urged her mare to match the pace. The two horses thundered around the oak tree, hooves churning up clods of earth, and then they were heading back, the race truly on. The return journey was brutal. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them without mercy, and Francesca could feel sweat soaking through her clothes. Her mare was breathing hard, flecks of foam appearing at the corners of her mouth, but the animal showed no signs of giving up. Beside her, Yates looked just as determined, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. They were neck and neck as they rejoined the creek, and Francesca made her move. She knew this section of the route better than Yates did, knew where the ground was firmest and the path smoothest. She guided her mare slightly to the left, following a track that was less obvious but faster, and suddenly they were pulling ahead. Yates realized what was happening and tried to respond, but his stallion stumbled slightly on a patch of loose stone, losing precious seconds. By the time he recovered, Francesca had opened up a gap of several lengths, and she pressed the advantage, urging her mare on with voice and touch. The final mile seemed to last forever. Francesca could hear the crowd in the distance, their voices carrying on the wind, and she knew they were close. Her mare was tiring, her strides becoming slightly less fluid, but they were so close, so very close. Then she heard hoofbeats behind her, rapid and gaining fast. Yates had found some reserve of speed in his stallion, and they were closing the gap with terrifying swiftness. Francesca leaned even lower, whispering frantic encouragement to her mare, begging the animal for one last burst of speed. They crossed the finish line with Francesca half a length ahead, the crowd erupting in cheers and applause. She pulled her mare up gently, patting the animal's neck and murmuring praise even as her own chest heaved with exertion. Yates came alongside a moment later, and she could see that he was breathing just as hard as she was. For a long moment they just looked at each other, and then Yates began to laugh. It was a rich, genuine sound, full of admiration and joy, and Francesca found herself laughing too, the tension of the race draining away. "You are incredible," Yates said, still laughing. "Absolutely incredible. I thought I had you there at the end." "You almost did," Francesca admitted, sliding down from her mare's back on shaky legs. "Your stallion is faster than I gave him credit for." They were surrounded by well-wishers within moments, people clapping them on the back and offering congratulations. Someone pressed a cup of cool water into Francesca's hand, and she drank it gratefully before offering the rest to her mare. The animal was exhausted but seemed pleased with herself, ears pricked forward as if enjoying the attention. Yates worked his way through the crowd to her side. "I believe I owe you another dinner," he said, "though at this rate I am going to go broke feeding you." "I would settle for a walk," Francesca said impulsively. Somewhere quiet where we can talk without half the county listening in." His face brightened. "There is a spot I know, about a mile from here. Quiet meadow by the river. Would that suit?" "Perfectly." They made arrangements to meet later that afternoon after they had both taken care of their horses and cleaned up. Francesca rode home in a daze of exhaustion and elation, her mind already leaping ahead to the walk with Yates, to what they might say to each other, to where this strange and wonderful thing between them might lead. Her father was waiting at the ranch, and the pride on his face when she told him about the victory made her heart swell. "You have your mother's determination," he said gruffly. "She would have been proud of you today." "Yates asked me to take a walk with him this afternoon," Francesca said. "By the river?" Robert nodded slowly. "He is a good man from what I have been able to learn, works hard, treats people fairly, does not gamble or drink to excess. If you are going to lose your heart to someone, you could do worse." "I think I already have," Francesca admitted. "Lost my heart, I mean." "Then be smart about it," her father advised. "Do not rush into anything, but do not let fear hold you back either. Life is too short for regrets." Francesca changed into a clean blouse and riding skirt, brushed the dust from her hair, and rode out to meet Yates at the appointed time. He was waiting at the edge of the meadow he had described, his horse grazing nearby, and he helped her dismount with easy familiarity. The meadow was beautiful, a carpet of wild grasses dotted with late summer wildflowers. The river ran along one edge, its water clear and cold from mountain snowmelt, and cottonwood trees provided dappled shade. They walked side by side, not touching but close enough that Francesca could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I have been thinking," Yates said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "about what I want, about the future. And what do you want?" Francesca asked, her heart beginning to pound. "A ranch of my own, like I told you. But more than that, I want someone to share it with. Someone strong and capable, someone who is not afraid of hard work or challenges. Someone who can beat me in a horse race and make me laugh at the same time." He stopped walking and turned to face her, and Francesca found herself holding her breath. "I know we have only known each other a few days," Yates continued. "And I know this is fast, maybe too fast. But Francesca, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." "I feel the same way," Francesca whispered. "It is terrifying and wonderful and completely insane, but I do." Yates reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Then let us see where this goes. No promises yet, no rushing into anything. Just you and me, getting to know each other, seeing if what we feel now can grow into something lasting." "I would like that very much," Francesca said. He drew her closer, and she went willingly, her free hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating beneath her palm, rapid and strong, matching the rhythm of her own. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, a question rather than a demand, and she answered by rising up on her toes and deepening the kiss. They stood there in the meadow for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the river murmuring softly beside them and the mountains standing guard in the distance. Francesca felt as if she had found something she had not even realized she was searching for, a sense of rightness and completion that went beyond words. Over the following weeks, Francesca and Yates became a common sight around Salida, riding together, attending town socials, sharing meals at the Grand Hotel or picnicking in the mountains. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to practical matters of ranching, from shared dreams to childhood memories. Francesca learned that Yates had a scar on his left shoulder from a bull that had charged him when he was 16, and that his favorite meal was his mother's chicken and dumplings. Yates learned that Francesca could recite poetry from memory, that she had once broken her arm falling from a barn loft, and that she cried at beautiful sunsets when she thought no one was looking. Robert Vaughn watched the courtship with a mixture of approval and melancholy. He liked Yates and trusted him with his daughter, but he also knew that Francesca's happiness might eventually take her away from the ranch that had been her whole world. Still, he welcomed Yates into their home, sharing meals and conversation, teaching him the particulars of their operation, and listening with interest to Yates's ideas about horse breeding and ranch management. In late September, as the aspens began to turn gold in the high country, Yates received word that Mr. Thompson was ready to sell his ranch. The price was fair, and Yates had saved enough for a substantial down payment, but he would need to take on debt to complete the purchase. It was a risk, but it was also the opportunity he had been working toward for years. He discussed it with Francesca during a ride up into the mountains, the two of them stopping at a viewpoint that offered a panoramic vista of the valley below. "If I do this, I will be tied to that land for years," he said. "Every penny will go toward paying off the loan and building up the herd. It will be hard work with little reward in the beginning." "Are you having second thoughts?" Francesca asked. "About the ranch, no. But about asking you to be a part of it, yes. I want to offer you everything, Francesca. A home, a partnership, a life together. But right now, all I can offer is uncertainty and struggle." Francesca turned in her saddle to face him fully. "Yates Norton, I fell in love with you because of who you are, not what you have. If you think hard work and uncertainty are going to scare me off, you do not know me very well. I was raised on a ranch. I know exactly what I would be getting into. You deserve better than a half-built house and a mountain of debt. I deserve a man who loves me, who respects me, and who will stand beside me as an equal partner. Everything else is just details." Yates dismounted and helped her down, pulling her into his arms. "Marry me," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know it is soon, and I know I should probably have a ring and do this properly, but marry me, Francesca. Let us build something together, a ranch and a life and a family. Let me spend every day trying to be worthy of you." Tears sprang to Francesca's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she kissed him back with all the love and certainty in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing, giddy with happiness and the enormity of the commitment they had just made. They rode back to the Vaughn ranch to share the news with Robert, who took it with surprising calm. "About time," he said, shaking Yates's hand with a firm grip. "I was beginning to wonder if you were ever going to get around to asking." The wedding was planned for early November, giving Yates time to finalize the purchase of the Thompson ranch, and for Francesca to prepare for the transition. It would be a small ceremony, just family and close friends, held at the little church in Salida with a reception at the Grand Hotel afterward. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Yates closed on the ranch and immediately began making improvements, repairing fences and outbuildings, preparing the main house for his new bride. Francesca helped whenever she could, her practical knowledge proving invaluable as they worked side by side. They made decisions together about everything from paint colors to furniture placement, and Francesca felt a deep satisfaction in creating a home that was truly theirs. She also worked with a seamstress in town to create her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and neckline. It was nothing like the elaborate confections she had seen in fashion magazines from the East, but it suited her personality and the occasion perfectly. The night before the wedding, Francesca lay awake in her childhood bedroom, thinking about how much her life was about to change. Tomorrow she would become Francesca Norton, wife and partner to the man she loved. Tomorrow she would leave her father's house and begin a new chapter, full of uncertainty but also infinite possibility. There was a soft knock on her door, and her father entered, carrying an oil lamp. "Could not sleep either?" he asked, settling into the chair by her window. "Too excited," Francesca admitted, "and maybe a little scared." "That is natural. Marriage is a big step, especially when it comes with all the responsibilities of running a ranch. But I have watched you and Yates together, and I have no doubts. You are well matched. You bring out the best in each other. I am going to miss you, Papa." "I am only a few miles away," Robert said gently, "and you are always welcome here anytime. This will always be your home, too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This was your mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold locket. "She wore it every day until she got too sick to put it on. I want you to have it, to carry a piece of her with you into your new life." Francesca took the locket with trembling fingers, opening it to see two tiny portraits inside, one of her mother as a young woman, the other of herself as a baby. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will treasure it always." They sat together in comfortable silence until the lamp began to gutter, and then Robert kissed his daughter's forehead and left her to sleep. Francesca lay down with the locket clutched in her hand, and this time she drifted off within minutes. The wedding day dawned crisp and clear, the November air carrying a hint of winter but still pleasant enough for the outdoor photographs that had been planned. Francesca dressed with the help of two friends from town, both of them chattering excitedly as they arranged her hair and adjusted her veil. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the elegant woman staring back, and she felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. The church was packed when she arrived, nearly everyone in Salida having turned out to witness the union of the finest rider in the county and the cowboy who had captured her heart. Francesca walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes fixed on Yates, who stood at the altar looking handsome and slightly overwhelmed in his best suit. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Francesca heard herself reciting vows, felt Yates slip a simple gold band onto her finger, and then the reverend was pronouncing them husband and wife. And Yates was kissing her to the sound of applause and cheering from the congregation. The reception at the Grand Hotel was a joyful affair, with music and dancing and more food than Francesca had ever seen in one place. She and Yates moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and good wishes, and when the band struck up a waltz, he led her onto the floor for their first dance as a married couple. "Happy," he murmured as they swayed to the music. "Deliriously," Francesca replied. "You." "More than I ever thought possible. I love you, Francesca Norton." "I love you too, Yates Norton, now and always." They left the reception as the sun was setting, riding out to their ranch under a sky painted in shades of orange and pink. The house was modest, just 4 rooms and a covered porch, but Yates had strung lanterns along the porch railing and they cast a warm, welcoming glow. He carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, setting her down gently in the front room. "Welcome home, wife," he said. "Home," Francesca repeated, testing out the word. It felt right. This place, this man, this life they were about to build together. It all felt exactly right. Their first year of marriage was everything they had anticipated: hard work, long hours, and challenges that tested them both. But it was also filled with moments of pure joy, with quiet evenings spent talking by the fire, with shared laughter over mishaps and mistakes, with the deep satisfaction of watching their efforts bear fruit. They built up the horse herd, combining Francesca's mare and Yates's stallion with carefully selected breeding stock. Francesca's eye for quality and Yates's business acumen proved to be a formidable combination, and within months, they had developed a reputation for producing some of the finest horses in the region. They also learned to navigate the complexities of partnership, both in business and in marriage. There were disagreements, of course, moments when they clashed over decisions or when the stress of finances and work threatened to drive a wedge between them. But they had promised to face everything together, and they honored that promise, working through problems with honesty and mutual respect. In the spring of 1884, Francesca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but the reality of bringing a new life into the world while managing a ranch and a growing business was daunting. Yates was thrilled, his excitement so pure and unfiltered that it eased Francesca's fears. "We will figure it out," he assured her, "just like we have figured out everything else, together." Her father was equally delighted, already planning modifications to the house to accommodate a nursery and offering to help with ranch work as Francesca's pregnancy progressed. The whole community seemed invested in the impending arrival, with women stopping by to offer advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, and men teasing Yates about sleepless nights and dirty diapers. As summer turned to fall, Francesca's belly grew round and her movements became more awkward, but she refused to slow down. She still rode, though Yates insisted she stick to the gentlest horses and avoid any unnecessary risks. She still helped with the books and made decisions about breeding and sales. She was determined to prove that motherhood would not diminish her capabilities, and Yates supported her completely, even when he worried about her pushing herself too hard. In early December, as snow began to dust the peaks of the Sawatch Range, Francesca went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when both Francesca and the midwife feared the worst. But Yates stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for putting her in this position. Finally, as dawn broke on a Sunday morning, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that suggested he would never have trouble making himself heard. Yates wept openly when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, and Francesca, exhausted but overwhelmed with love, reached out to touch her son's tiny hand. They named him William Robert Norton, after Yates's father and Francesca's. He was a healthy, vigorous baby, and he brought a new dimension to their lives. The ranch work continued, but now it was punctuated by feedings and diaper changes, by lullabies sung in the middle of the night, and the wonder of watching a tiny human discover the world. Francesca discovered that she loved being a mother, though it was harder than she had anticipated. There were days when she felt pulled in a dozen directions, when the demands of the baby and the ranch and her marriage seemed impossible to balance. But she and Yates worked as a team, splitting responsibilities and supporting each other through the exhaustion and the challenges. William grew quickly, reaching all his milestones with the same determination his parents brought to everything. By his first birthday, he was walking and babbling, his personality already evident in his curiosity and his fearlessness. He loved the horses, reaching out chubby hands to pat their noses and giggling with delight when Yates lifted him onto the gentlest mare's back. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1886, they had expanded their operation significantly, purchasing additional land and increasing their breeding program. Their horses were sought after throughout Colorado and beyond, known for their speed, stamina, and even temperament. Francesca's reputation as a horsewoman had only grown, and she received regular requests for advice and training assistance from other ranchers. She and Yates also became pillars of the Salida community, active in church affairs and local governance. Yates served on the town council for a term, helping to make decisions about infrastructure and development, while Francesca organized a women's group that focused on education and support for families in need. In the spring of 1887, Francesca discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in October, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth. The birth was quicker this time, only 6 hours from start to finish, and Sarah was a calm, easy baby from the start, content to sleep and nurse and watch the world with solemn blue eyes. William, now almost 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to changing diapers. Francesca and Yates watched their children interact with hearts full of gratitude and love, marveling at the family they had created. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch thrived, their children grew, and Francesca and Yates's love for each other deepened into something rich and unshakable. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts that strained their water resources, illnesses that swept through the herd, and the ever-present financial pressures of running a business. But they faced each obstacle together, their partnership stronger for every trial they overcame. In 1889, Robert Vaughn suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. Francesca was devastated, and she insisted that her father move in with them so she could care for him properly. Yates supported the decision without hesitation, helping to convert the downstairs study into a bedroom and making modifications to accommodate Robert's limited mobility. Having her father in the house was bittersweet for Francesca. She cherished the extra time with him, the opportunity for her children to know their grandfather better, but she also grieved for the vital, independent man he had been. Robert bore his limitations with grace, however, finding purpose in teaching William about ranching and reading stories to Sarah. He lived with them for 2 more years before passing peacefully in his sleep in the summer of 1891. Francesca mourned deeply, but she also felt grateful for the time they had been given, for the reconciliation of their 2 households into one extended family. The Vaughn Ranch was absorbed into the Norton operation, expanding their holdings significantly and securing their position as one of the most successful ranching operations in the region. As the 1890s progressed, Francesca and Yates watched the world change around them. The wild, rough-edged character of the frontier was gradually giving way to something more settled and civilized. Towns grew larger, railroads expanded, and the lawlessness that had once defined the West began to fade. There were still challenges and dangers, but they were different than in the early days. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses as much as his parents did. By the time he was 10, he could ride as well as many adults, and he had an intuitive understanding of horse behavior that suggested he would someday be an excellent rancher in his own right. Sarah was more interested in books and learning, though she could hold her own in the saddle when necessary. She devoured every book in the house and begged for more, and Francesca and Yates arranged for a tutor to supplement her education beyond what the local schoolhouse could provide. They wanted their children to have opportunities they themselves had never had, and they were determined to support whatever paths William and Sarah chose. In 1895, Francesca and Yates celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a trip to Denver, leaving the children in the care of trusted ranch hands. It was the first time they had been alone together in years, and they reveled in the chance to reconnect without the constant demands of work and family. They stayed at a grand hotel, dined at elegant restaurants, and attended a performance at the opera house. But their favorite moments were the quiet ones, walking hand in hand through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing, remembering the early days of their courtship and marveling at how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked one evening as they watched the sunset from their hotel window. "Giving up your independence to marry me and take on all the responsibilities of the ranch and the children?" Francesca turned to him, surprised by the question. "Not for a single moment." "You are the best decision I ever made, Yates Norton. This life we have built together, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I dared to dream." "I feel the same way," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You challenge me, inspire me, and love me in ways I never knew were possible. Every day with you is a gift." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity, and Francesca felt the same rush of desire and connection she had experienced as a new bride. If anything, their physical relationship had deepened over the years, becoming an expression of the profound intimacy they shared in every aspect of their lives. When they returned home, they threw themselves back into the work of the ranch with renewed energy. The children were growing up fast, and Francesca was acutely aware that their time as a young family was limited. She made a conscious effort to be present for the small moments, to appreciate the daily rhythms of their life rather than always looking ahead to the next challenge or goal. In 1897, Francesca turned 37, and she felt the passage of time acutely. Her body was not as resilient as it had been in her 20s, and she could no longer ride for hours without feeling the effects. But she had gained wisdom and confidence that more than compensated for any physical limitations, and she found deep satisfaction in mentoring younger women in the community who were interested in ranching and horse training. Yates, approaching 40, had matured into a respected leader in the region. He served on multiple boards and committees, his opinion sought on everything from water rights to railroad expansion. But he never let those responsibilities interfere with his primary commitment to his family and the ranch, always making sure he was present for important moments in his children's lives. William, now 14, was becoming a young man. He had his father's height and his mother's green eyes, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made Francesca's heart swell with pride. He talked about taking over the ranch someday, and Francesca and Yates began to include him more actively in decision-making, teaching him the business side of ranching as well as the practical skills. Sarah, at 11, was showing signs of the same independent spirit that had defined her mother's youth. She announced that she wanted to become a teacher, and Francesca encouraged the ambition wholeheartedly, even as she worried about Sarah leaving home to pursue her education. As the century drew to a close, Francesca found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. It had started with a horse race, a moment of defiant pride and competitive spirit, and it had blossomed into a love story that had shaped every aspect of her life. She thought about the young woman she had been, challenging the fastest cowboy in the county without any thought for where it might lead, and she smiled at the memory. That race had changed everything. It had introduced her to Yates, had sparked the connection that had grown into the deepest love she had ever known. And from that love had come children, a thriving ranch, a place in the community, and a sense of purpose that filled her days with meaning. One evening in the spring of 1899, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Yates reached over and took her hand. "Do you remember our first race?" he asked. "How could I forget? I beat you soundly." "You did indeed. And then I asked you to dinner, which was the smartest thing I ever did." "I thought you were just trying to save face," Francesca admitted. "I never imagined it would lead to all of this." "Neither did I, but I am so grateful it did. You are my partner in every sense of the word, Francesca. My best friend, my lover, the mother of my children, and the person I trust more than anyone in the world. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." Francesca leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you too, more than words can express." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and the stars began to appear, one by one, in the vast Colorado sky. Inside the house, they could hear William and Sarah laughing over some shared joke, and the sound made Francesca smile. This was her life. This beautiful, challenging, rewarding life that had grown from a single moment of courage and competition. She would not change a thing. The new century brought new challenges and opportunities. In 1902, William left home to attend the Colorado Agricultural College in Fort Collins, determined to bring modern scientific methods to ranching. It was hard for Francesca to see him go, but she was proud of his ambition and his dedication to carrying on the family legacy. Sarah, meanwhile, had indeed pursued her dream of becoming a teacher. At 16, she was attending a normal school in Denver, preparing for a career in education. She wrote home regularly, her letters filled with observations about her studies and the rapidly changing world around her. With both children away, Francesca and Yates found themselves alone together for the first time in nearly 20 years. It was an adjustment, the quiet house feeling too large and empty at times. But it was also an opportunity to reconnect as a couple, to rediscover the intimacy and partnership that had always been at the core of their relationship. They took long rides together through the mountains, revisiting places that had been special during their courtship. They talked about their dreams for the future, about what they wanted to accomplish in the years they had left. And they made plans to travel, to see parts of the country they had never visited, now that they had capable ranch hands who could manage the operation in their absence. In 1904, they took a trip to San Antonio to visit Yates's family, whom Francesca had never met. It was a revelation to see where Yates had come from, to meet his parents and brothers and the sister who had written him so many letters over the years. The Norton family welcomed her warmly, and Francesca could see so much of Yates in his father's steady demeanor and his mother's kind eyes. They returned to Colorado energized and grateful, more appreciative than ever of the life they had built. The ranch continued to thrive, their reputation for quality horses undiminished. William graduated from college in 1906 and returned home to take on more responsibility in the operation, bringing with him new ideas about breeding and training that complemented Francesca and Yates's experience. Sarah also returned to Salida in 1908, taking a position at the local school. She had blossomed into a confident, intelligent young woman, and Francesca watched with pride as Sarah made her own mark on the community. As Francesca approached 50, she sometimes marveled at how quickly the years had passed. It seemed like only yesterday that she had been challenging Yates to that first race, her heart pounding with competitive fire. Now her hair was threaded with silver, her hands bore the scars and calluses of decades of hard work, and her body moved with the careful deliberation of middle age, but she regretted nothing. Every line on her face told a story, every scar was a badge of honor. She had lived fully and loved deeply, and she had built something that would endure beyond her own lifetime. In 1910, William married a young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch, and a year later, they presented Francesca and Yates with their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas. Holding her grandson for the first time, Francesca felt the circle completing, the continuation of the legacy she and Yates had created. Sarah married in 1912, choosing a fellow teacher named Jonathan who shared her passion for education. Their wedding was a joyful celebration, and Francesca cried happy tears as she watched her daughter embark on her own journey of love and partnership. As the years continued to pass, Francesca and Yates gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operation of the ranch, allowing William to take the lead. They remained active advisors and helped with major decisions, but they also allowed themselves to slow down, to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They spent more time with their grandchildren, watching them grow and teaching them about horses and ranching. They tended a garden together, something Francesca had never had time for during the busiest years. They read books aloud to each other in the evenings, revisiting old favorites and discovering new stories. In 1918, as the world reeled from the Great War and the influenza pandemic, Francesca and Yates celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. They were in their late 50s now, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and time, but their love for each other remained as strong as ever. They hosted a small party at the ranch, with William and Catherine, Sarah and Jonathan, and all 5 grandchildren in attendance. As Francesca looked around the table at her family, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and accomplishment. "I want to make a toast," Yates said, standing and raising his glass. 33 years ago, I lost a horse race to the most remarkable woman I have ever known. It was the best loss of my life, because it gave me the courage to ask her to dinner, and that dinner led to this, to all of this." He gestured around the table, his eyes shining with emotion. "A partnership that has weathered every storm, children who make us proud every single day. Grandchildren who remind us of the joy and wonder in the world, a ranch that will endure for generations. All of it started with a race and a rematch over dinner." He turned to Francesca, his voice growing husky. "You challenged me to be better, to dream bigger, to love more deeply. You have been my partner, my lover, my best friend, and my inspiration. Here is to you, my darling wife. Here is to us. And here is to all the years still to come." Everyone raised their glasses, and Francesca felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She stood and moved to Yates's side, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I love you," she whispered. "Then, now, and always." "And I love you," he replied, "forever and a day." They stood together, surrounded by their family, the legacy of their love made manifest in the faces around them. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Francesca thought about how many sunsets she and Yates had watched together over the years. Thousands, probably. Tens of thousands. And yet each one still felt special, still filled her with wonder and gratitude. This was the life she had chosen, the life that had chosen her. A life built on love and partnership, on challenge and triumph, on the willingness to take risks and the commitment to see things through. It had started with a horse race and a bold challenge, and it had become more beautiful and meaningful than she ever could have imagined. As the party continued around them, Francesca leaned her head against Yates's shoulder and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. Whatever years remained to them, they would face them together, just as they had faced everything else. Partners. Lovers. Best friends, forever and always. The years that followed were gentle ones, marked by the quiet rhythms of retirement and the joys of watching their grandchildren grow. Francesca and Yates spent their days tending their garden, taking leisurely rides through the mountains, and hosting Sunday dinners that brought the entire family together. William proved to be an excellent steward of the ranch, combining the traditional methods he had learned from his parents with the modern techniques he had studied in college. The operation continued to thrive under his leadership, and Francesca felt deep satisfaction in knowing that the legacy she and Yates had built would continue for generations to come. Sarah's family flourished as well. She and Jonathan had 3 children, all of them bright and curious, and Sarah continued to teach, shaping young minds and instilling in them a love of learning. She often brought her students out to the ranch for field trips, and Francesca delighted in sharing stories about the early days of Salida and the changes she had witnessed over her lifetime. In the spring of 1925, Francesca turned 65. Her body was frail now, her movements slow and careful, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit undimmed. Yates, at 68, had weathered the years better in some ways, still tall and strong despite the arthritis that plagued his joints. They celebrated her birthday with a small gathering of family and close friends, and as Francesca looked around at the assembled group, she felt overwhelmed by the richness of her life. She had been blessed beyond measure, and she knew it. That summer, they took one last trip together, traveling by train to the Grand Canyon. Francesca had always wanted to see it, and Yates was determined to make that dream a reality while they were still able to travel. They stood together at the rim, holding hands and gazing out at the vast expanse of rock and sky, and Francesca felt her breath catch at the sheer beauty and scale of it. "It is magnificent," she whispered. "It is," Yates agreed, "but not more magnificent than you." She laughed, swatting his arm playfully. "You are incorrigible, and you love me for it. I do. I really, really do." They returned home renewed and grateful, treasuring each moment they had together. They knew that time was precious now, that their years were limited, but they refused to dwell on endings. Instead, they focused on the present, on the small pleasures of daily life, on the love that had sustained them for more than 4 decades. In the fall of 1927, Yates suffered a heart attack while working in the garden. He survived, but it weakened him significantly, and the doctor warned that another episode could be fatal. Francesca nursed him devotedly, and they adapted their routines to accommodate his limitations. They spent more time on the porch, watching the seasons change, talking about their life together and the memories they had created. Yates liked to reminisce about that first race, about how stunned he had been when Francesca crossed the finish line ahead of him. "I knew right then that you were someone special," he said one crisp October afternoon. "The way you sat on that horse, so confident and strong. The way you looked at me when you won, not gloating but proud. I fell in love with you in that moment, I think, though it took me a while to realize it." "I was drawn to you too," Francesca admitted. "Even though I was trying so hard to beat you, there was something about you that intrigued me. The way you took your loss with grace, the way you asked me to dinner instead of sulking. It showed character." "Best decision I ever made, asking you to that dinner. Best decision I ever made, saying yes." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, watching the aspens turn gold on the mountainside. The ranch bustled with activity in the distance, William and his sons working with the horses, and Francesca felt a deep peace settle over her. This was right. This was how life was meant to be lived, with love and purpose, with family and community, with gratitude for every single day. Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep on a snowy December night in 1928, just a few weeks shy of their 43rd wedding anniversary. Francesca woke to find him cold beside her, his face serene in death, and though she had known this day would come, the reality of it shattered her heart. She mourned deeply, the grief overwhelming at times, but she also felt grateful for the years they had been given. 43 years of marriage, of partnership, of love that had never wavered. Not everyone was so blessed. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the impact Yates had made on the community. Francesca sat in the front pew of the church, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and she listened to the tributes with tears streaming down her face. But alongside the grief was gratitude. Gratitude for every moment they had shared, every challenge they had faced together, every joy they had celebrated. Yates Norton had been the love of her life, her partner in every sense of the word, and she would carry him in her heart until her own dying day. In the years that followed, Francesca lived quietly at the ranch, cared for by William and Catherine. She spent her days writing letters to her grandchildren, working in the garden when the weather permitted, and reading books from the extensive library she and Yates had accumulated over the years. She also wrote her memoirs, wanting to preserve the story of her life for future generations. She wrote about growing up on her father's ranch, about challenging Yates to that fateful race, about falling in love and building a life together. She wrote about the challenges and triumphs, the joys and sorrows, the beautiful complexity of a life well lived. Sarah helped her compile and organize the memoirs, and together they created a testament to love and partnership that would endure long after Francesca was gone. Francesca lived to see her 80th birthday, celebrated with a grand party that brought together 4 generations of family. She sat in a place of honor, a matriarch surrounded by the fruits of her life's work, and she felt complete. 2 months later, on a warm spring evening in 1940, Francesca Vaughn Norton passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was laid to rest beside Yates in the cemetery overlooking Salida, the mountains standing guard in the distance, the same mountains that had witnessed their entire story. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to mourn and to celebrate, sharing stories about the remarkable woman who had shaped all their lives. They talked about her strength and determination, her wisdom and kindness, her fierce love for her family and her community. But most of all, they talked about the love story that had defined her life. The story of a young woman who had challenged the fastest cowboy in the county to a horse race, had beaten him soundly, and had captured his heart in the process. The story of a partnership built on respect and trust, of a love that had grown deeper and stronger with each passing year. It was a story worth telling, worth preserving, worth celebrating. And as the family gathered around Francesca's grave, watching the sun set over the Colorado mountains one last time, they knew that her legacy would endure for generations to come. The ranch continued to thrive under William's stewardship, and later under his children and grandchildren. The horses bearing the Norton name remained sought after throughout the West, a testament to the vision and dedication of Francesca and Yates. Sarah's teaching legacy lived on through the hundreds of students she had influenced over her career, many of whom went on to become teachers themselves, spreading knowledge and inspiration far beyond Salida. And the love story, the beautiful, heartfelt love story that had started with a horse race and a dinner invitation, became a cherished family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. A reminder that the best things in life often begin with a moment of courage and a willingness to take a chance on love. Francesca and Yates Norton had lived fully and loved deeply, and their story would echo through the generations, inspiring others to be bold, to dream big, and to cherish the partnerships that make life worth living. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the ranch or the horses or the material success, but the example of what true love and partnership could create when two people committed to facing life together, as equals and companions, through every challenge and triumph. Their story was written in the land they had worked, in the children and grandchildren they had raised, in the community they had served, and in the hearts of everyone who had known them. It was a story of the Wild West, of courage and competition, of love found and nurtured and sustained across a lifetime. And it all started with a dust-filled race through the Colorado countryside, with a young woman on a chestnut mare crossing the finish line ahead of the fastest cowboy in the county, and with a man who was wise enough to recognize that losing that race was the first step toward winning everything that truly mattered. Their love story had come full circle. From that first challenge to the peaceful rest they now shared beneath the mountains they had loved. And though they were gone, their legacy lived on, a testament to the power of love, partnership, and the courage to take a chance when the opportunity presented itself. The Norton Ranch stood as a monument to their vision. The horses they had bred continued to race across Colorado pastures, and the family they had created carried forward their values and their spirit. On quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the mountains glowed pink in the sunset, it was almost possible to imagine Francesca and Yates riding together across the land they had loved, their laughter echoing through the valleys, their spirits forever entwined. It was a fitting end to a beautiful story, one that reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest adventures often begin with a single moment of courage, and that true love, once found, can last not just a lifetime but forever.